Well, while Danielle's putting the photos up in the chat, I'm going to get us all started today. So I'm going to do my Zoom wave. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this evening's program, Stay the Path, How to Make Positive Change and Meaningful Connections. My name's Heather Corbett, and I work in the Bates Office of Alumni Engagement. And as our program's description indicates, these challenging times call for us to show up big in different ways. And we're so pleased that Molly Keehn, Bates Class of 2000, and Karl Henricksen of CoJourn are here today with us to share more about the program and how it can help participants follow through on their desires to make positive changes in their lives. When Molly contacted us, I think it was this spring, Molly, we were so impressed not only with the program's mission, but with her passion and energy and commitment, and we hope you will be too. So let me just give you a little bit of info about our presenters this evening. In addition to being the founder of CoJourn, Molly also teaches at Mount Holyoke. She has a background in higher ed and has been leading trainings and workshops in the community, as well as teaching intergroup dialogue and social justice courses at the undergraduate and graduate level. She was a social psych major here at Bates, or I shouldn't say here because I'm in Brunswick, but you know what I mean. Holds a master's degree specializing in college student development counseling, and earned her doctorate in education at UMass Amherst, researching connection, vulnerability, and personal storytelling as practices to enhance an understanding across difference. And Karl, also a co-founder, is formerly a full-time professional musician and most recently a software engineer. Karl lives in Charleston now and works as a website designer and videographer, holds a bachelor's of science in physics from UMass, and has been described as a Renaissance man. This session is our first in our Alumni Expert Series. So please be on the lookout for more of these alumni-driven programs over the course of the summer and into the fall. We continue to connect with alumni about the Experts program, so if you or a fellow alum has a skill or a talent or an area of expertise that could be shared with the Bates alumni community, please let us know. Before I turn the keys over to Molly and Karl, I want to remind everybody of just a couple of logistical items. This session is being recorded for the Bates community. The first half of our program will be a general information session with some tools and tricks for accessibility, or accountability rather, and connection. And we'll have a little bit of a brief stretch break. And in the second half, you can learn specifically about how to get started with CoJourn. There'll be ample opportunity to ask questions, and you can do that either in the chat or you can wait for the question and answer periods that will come throughout. So now to kick off our program, it's my pleasure to introduce Molly Keehn and Karl Henricksen.
Thank you, Heather. And thank you for saying yes to us getting to share this program. I really appreciate everyone in the office's energy, and it was so fun to get to meet with you all a couple of times during the spring. So thank you, Danielle, Heather, and Stephanie. Karl, are you pulling up the slides?
I'm ready, yeah.
Beautiful. This is the joy of getting to co-present. So as Heather mentioned, our program is called How to Stay the Path, How to Make Positive Change and Meaningful Connections. And we'll share more momentarily about our thinking about the agenda. But we won't need to say a whole lot for the introductions. Thank you, Heather, for those, the beautiful summary of both me and Karl and our experiences. I will add that Karl and I actually met playing in a band together, and I was the accordion player, sort of a advanced beginner accordion player, and Karl was the lead singer and guitarist, and that's how we have initially met each other back in 2013, and then became friends and colleagues, and now we are co-authors of the book CoJourn. And as people are grounded, so we added this slide because a lot of the Zoom meetings I've been lately, it's always been helpful to just invite everyone just to arrive fully. I know people might be running from dinner or from taking care of young ones or other things. And just invite us to take a collective 3 breaths, myself and Karl included, as we get started. So you can close your eyes if you want to. Just I always think it's helpful to take a moment to land and ground and just remind everyone that this is for you today. So please take care of yourselves throughout this. If you need to step out and come back on or whatever you need to do, please do that. And I think a lot of people are familiar with Zoom and not everybody uses it frequently. And so the only main things we'll be using today are the mute and unmute, which you'll see in the bottom left corner. And then as Heather said, if you have questions for us throughout, please get them in the chat and we will pause a couple of times to take verbal questions and also address what came up in the chat. And along with Karl and I today, we're joined by our 2 Bates College interns who are working with us with CoJourn this summer, which has been an absolute delight so far. They're in their 2nd week of the internship. So we did not have them present it today because it felt like they're still getting oriented to CoJourn. But I wanted to invite both Ariel and Michael to just have a chance to introduce yourself to the group. And Karl, maybe we should stop the screen sharing so that we can see their faces. And we invited them to say just a little bit about what they're working on with CoJourn and or what drew them to this internship. Ariel, would you like to go first?
Sure. So hi, my name is Ariel. I'm a recent Bates grad. I majored in math and sociology and minored in education. This summer, I will be working with Karl and Molly to expand the undergrad offerings for CoJourn and also working on course development. Yeah, and after the summer, I am looking for a longer term position in education. So if anyone knows of anything, I would love to get in touch.
Thank you, Ariel. Yes. And Michael.
Yes. Hi, I'm Michael. I'm a rising junior, double major in politics and visual arts with a minor in French. And I'm focusing this summer on the business development side of things and getting the products together and also looking at media management. I'm interested in social justice work with climate change, youth development, and I've done some media management work back home in Jamaica and for NGOs. So really excited.
Thank you both. And I just want to say that we actually, Karl and I totally restructured today's and changed around the order of today's presentation, thanks to some incredible feedback yesterday from Michael. And Ariel and Michael are going to be observing and giving us feedback as we go. So you both are a delight. Thank you for being with us and thank you for your care for CoJourn. And then finally, since we're a larger group, we're not going to have a chance to do verbal introductions, but we wanted to give folks a chance to just introduce themselves in the chat so we can have a sense of who's here in the space. We wanted to invite you to share your name and the pronoun you use if you want to. And for those who are not familiar with that practice, the reason we share our pronoun is because it's a way of announcing our gender identity, and we don't want to make assumptions about people's gender identity. So also your Bates class year and your location where you're calling in from. And then finally, we wanted people just, if something comes to mind, one place at Bates College that holds special memories for you. I was saying this morning with the interns, there's a particular tree outside Milliken House, which was my first year house that I used to like to sit under and do my reading for class. And so since that's the one commonality we all have, except for Karl, sadly. But we wanted to invite everyone else to write that in the chat. So I'll take a minute. So we have Liz Faye Adames and Ivan Adames. Liz's class of 2000 and one of my former roommates for many years. Bob Deininger, Mount David. Yes, that's a great location. And Gail Oberst, welcome everybody. Class of 1970, this is great. Emily Pritchard Schaefer Theater, yes. I loved seeing you perform there, Emily, over the years. Blair Hudson, the dining hall, Commons, Kate Kessler, Casey, also was in Milliken. Oh, I love that. Beautiful. Everybody. So funny. Great. Thank you all. It's nice to just have a chance to kind of land and hear who's here with us today.
So we kind of already went over the agenda a little bit, but just a little more info of like what we're getting into today. The first half is kind of maybe more first third, but kind of the bird's eye view of what CoJourn is, sort of informational. We talk about finding a partner, which is a big part of it. And then the second, meatier section is all about how to get started. We talk about guiding themes, this concept of, intentionality and goal setting, as well as like the structure of how you actually do it. And then kind of our, the secret sauce of CoJourn, which is these 8 core components towards the end. And then we'll have time for a little Q&A at the end, possibly, but we'll also make sure we stop at certain points so we can, discuss and think about how to apply these things to ourselves and our own lives. So just, we'll try to, because this is, sometimes it's a little hard to explain like what CoJourn is. A lot of times I've heard you don't really know what it is until you do it. But at its most basic, it's a personal growth goal achievement program where you kind of partner up with another person and help each other kind of create goals and go after the things you want to do in your life while meeting once a week. But we actually made a video recently that we're gonna play that kind of helps us explain this thing. It's kind of our video, summary. So we'll go over that first. And we have no audio.
You check those 2 boxes, Carl?
I thought I did. Let me try that again.
It's nice. Carl's an audio engineer. And so it's nice to have a co-presenter with those skills.
You would think. Yeah, you'd think I'd have this down by now. I don't know. I'm not sure what's up with that. So we're gonna skip this, I guess, and we'll describe it with the power of words instead. Basically, the CoJourn process, what we walk through. One of the first most important parts, and we're going to get to that next, is a crucial key is finding a partner. And so you begin by partnering up. You set a path, which is this yearly intention, or we call it a guiding theme because it's a little easier to grasp. I think there's a lot of words around intention, and people get a little confused with that. But then you commit to this program, you commit to your partner, you commit to yourself to basically check in once a week for 30 minutes. And then you apply the formula, these 8 core components. There is a practice element of it, I think, especially with some of the more counterintuitive aspects of it. And then each week you're going to set these 3 to 5 weekly milestones, we call them, because they're not just goals, but they're also mini intentions. And each week you sort of use this check-in with your partner to reflect and learn and figure out what's working, what's not working, and kind of hone your process and learn about goal setting, learn what works for you, learn what works for your partner. And that's it.
And so to share, the other thing in the video, it sort of speaks about how it's an accountability partner program. And a lot of people have had accountability buddies or worked with that in different ways. However, this is based in like a research-backed framework and as a way to have it actually really work. And also to build more connection. And so as we talk about it, we've gotten feedback. It's really helpful for people to hear about a little bit about the history and the context for the creation of the program. And so, Carl, if you go back one slide, that picture of us. So Carl and I, as I mentioned, met because we played in a band together. And it was back in 2013, and we were both going through a time of struggle. I was 5.5 years into my doctoral program in social justice education. And I had like 4 jobs. I was doing research. I was completely overwhelmed. And I was experiencing really intense anxiety like I hadn't dealt with before. And it was getting to be debilitating and really kind of impacting my quality of life. And I was trying to decide whether or not to drop out of graduate school. And things had really come to a head. And I had a sense of what I needed to do to get back on track. I was seeing a counselor. I had a lot of support and resources. But even though I knew what I needed to do, I just had trouble getting myself to do it. And Karl, will share a little bit more about his history and context, but was also going through a time of struggle. And so we created CoJourn as a way to help each other, just sort of drawing on our different areas of expertise, and made it up as a one-year experiment because we both really needed it in our life. So we had no idea it would kind of come anything out of that other than a little experiment between friends. And I do like to point out on that slide that you'll notice there's at least 3 breakfasts in front of us and a half gallon of orange juice, which was that indicator that we were kind of in a rough place. And so at the time, we discovered the very simple magic of accountability. And, this idea at the time, I was trying to develop a meditation practice to help with my anxiety. And I kept trying to do it, and I never actually did it. And I discovered one night I was talking to Karl, and I said, I promise you I'll meditate for 10 minutes every morning this week. And let's check in next Wednesday. And we did, and lo and behold, I actually meditated. And years later, we found that there's actually research studies that support this. One, in fact, if you go to the next slide, shares that if you tell somebody you're going to do something, write it down and then follow up with them, you're 76% likely to actually do it. In contrast to only 40% likely to do it if you don't set up that simple accountability structure. And so it's this sort of obvious but really magical life hack that we really used as we were creating CoJourn. Simultaneously, I was immersed in my doctoral research, and some of it was looking at some of the impacts of technology on connection. And at the time, really looking a lot at the value and need for sort of in-person or real-time synchronous human connection on the phone or via Zoom like this, and really drawing a lot on Brene Brown's work, who says connection is why we're here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. And simultaneously looking at some of the research, some of the positive studies. This is the longest longitudinal research study in history, came out of Harvard, that found that the #1 predictor of well-being and happiness in life is having relationships with people where we can who we can show ourselves to or tell most things to. And then simultaneously, this really heartbreaking research about increases in loneliness and disconnection worldwide, but these especially were focusing in the United States. And so this one study found that after 2015, the percent of people reporting feeling lonely was up to 40%. And I actually just read, I added this slide just yesterday. This is a Time Magazine article that just came out this week that says that, let me make sure I get the number right. This January, there was a Cygnus study that found that 60% of Americans felt some loneliness before the pandemic, and now 31% of Americans feel even lonelier than before as a result of COVID-19 and the forced sort of physical isolation. And so that was really informing the creation of CoJourn, both for myself at the time, but then later shaping it as a way to build one more closer connection in our lives with someone where we get to talk with them regularly and check in and have someone there. And just now in our current time, it's starting to feel even more significant. And so going back to that first year, I told you I was spiraling out from anxiety. I was overwhelmed. And so I made my guiding theme quieting myself. And all of my goals around that year were around that theme, whether it was meditating every day, whether it was spending time in nature, getting out for that hike, even if I didn't think I had time to, trying to take a real full day off every week. And then practicing, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no, which is something, and all of these things are still things I'm working on to this day, but I can say that helped get my anxiety in check enough to actually finish my doctoral dissertation and graduate the next year and really develop these habits that really serve me and help keep my anxiety in check. I still do my 10-minute meditation every morning.
And yeah, just a quick, from my part, this is actually, so this was my first year. I kind of got drawn into even thinking about CoJourn based on the connection stuff, because I think at that point in my life, I was super disconnected, really focused on a music career and, like all these things that I thought were so important. And then I kind of crashed and burned and realized that like the super important thing that I was missing was all these people that in my life that I had sort of, very quickly, they did, if you don't sort of foster these connections, they just kind of, they're not going to be there always, even family, it's like I hadn't talked to my brothers in like a month or two, it was just crazy. So that first year, I luckily I had that insight into myself, but having like each week I was making, 3 or 4 goals about simple things, like having a difficult talk or like a vulnerable talk with my sister who I lived nearby, or really spending time with my parents and like talking with them like just people instead of like, the weird, parent-child thing. Or just being more social. I tend to be a little more introverted, and it sort of helped me, push against that self-isolation that I kind of naturally do. And now this year I'm finding like, wow, I need this again because this is one of my things that I constantly struggle with. But it was amazing to see, how much my life just sort of unfolded when I started really putting attention on something that I desperately needed that attention. And so after that first year, Molly and I were like, wow, that was amazing. This is like this magical thing. So we sort of opened it up to friends and family, and then got a lot of feedback from them and sort of helped formalize what CoJourn was. And so we created a website and started putting it out there. And then little by little just started, we started tracking where people are using CoJourn, and this is a little map of the green dots are the US people and blue dots are international. But it's just been interesting to see, like, I think there's something very, very universal, I think, about needing connection and needing some way to follow through on the things that we want to be doing, especially in this modern society we're in now. And then just this past September, we finally brought it all together and wrote the book, that was our original thought was just, all right, we'll write a book. We're going to write a book about it and then we'll be done. And instead we kind of went off on the business side and we made videos and, did all these other things. And finally it's come together. I think we needed that though, to actually make sense in a book. And yeah, that's sort of helped lead us in different directions as well. Including.
So just this year we started partnering with University of Massachusetts Amherst to pilot CoJourn for college students, which is one of the demographics that's getting most hit by isolation and loneliness. There's been a huge shift. It used to be the elderly who were more hit by loneliness, and now it's 18 to 23 as the age, but we piloted it there with faculty and staff and are looking at working with other colleges and also organizations as a way to build more connection and forward movement in different ways. And then, we did 50 interviews with participants as we were right before writing the book, and a lot of the benefits were very things we would have anticipated: deeper connections, creating confidence, and follow through on life pursuits. But a couple that were surprising was one, just the exchange of wisdom and inspiration, like how you could talk to your CoJourn partner and hear their goal. Like I would hear Karl doing something really brave in his life, or doing, taking a risk, and it would make me in some way be braver in my life, because it was almost like positive peer pressure of that contagion. And then also just being lifted through supporting another through struggle. And, there's research that shows that, like, if we help someone going through a hard time, it actually boosts our well-being more than theirs. And so there would be something about coming into the CoJourn session feeling like down or low about my life, and then really being able to like hold space for someone else and coming out feeling that feeling of connection, and also just feeling better about everything in some way. And then finally, as a social justice educator, I think, you know, it's really, this quote by Yolo Akili is really powerful for me. Remember, oppression thrives off isolation. Connection is the only thing that can save us. And in a lot of the social justice work I do, you know, connection is really 0.0 as we think about, you know, different work around that. And speaking to that, we're in the process launching actually this Sunday our a pilot program of CoJourn specifically for racial justice. I'm working with a team of 8 different coaches who do social justice education work, pairing people to use our framework, but specifically around actions and education for racial justice. And so we're really excited about how that initiative will turn out. And there's still, we can add in the chat the sign up Google form if people are interested in learning more about that.
Oh, well, this video is probably not going to work, but yeah, for some reason the audio is not working. So we're going to skip over that. Save more time for a discussion. So we're gonna just pause briefly to see if anybody wants to share. You can either share in the chat or if anybody's brave enough to speak up. You know, what are you hoping to get out of? You know, what kind of drew you to the session? What are you interested in learning? Sometimes that also helps us direct, you know, where we put our attention. There's a lot to talk about in, you know, an hour and a half. We could talk for probably 8 hours and still not get through it all. But yeah, feel free to in the chat, or if anybody wants to pipe in, that's great too.
Carl, maybe you could stop sharing the screen just for
Yeah.
the timer so we can have a pause and land a little bit.
Sure.
And if there are any questions up until this point as well, this would be a good time to ask.
Well, I'll jump in since I have been living life on Zoom since March, as a lot of people. I feel like it's a lot less intimidating than it used to be. Actually, part of the reason I was interested tonight is because of the racial justice component that you just mentioned, Molly. I think it's something that I'm working on with through my job now, and I think because of the current moment that we're in, it feels both really exciting that there's so much momentum around it, but also very overwhelming because people want to do things so quickly. And I think I'm professionally through school, I'm interested in making sure that we do things that are sustainable as a school community and that don't last, you know, for 5 minutes. And so that is kind of what made me kind of interested in thinking about this kind of in a different way than, you know, I've paid attention to your project a little bit over the years, but I had thought about it more for, I guess, more personal things. And so I was intrigued by the idea of using it for more like in a different context, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And I can add, I'm putting in the chat, both of those videos are on our website where the volume didn't work. So if you're interested, you can go back and see them. They're just like a couple minutes in the future. And I'm putting in the CoJourn for Racial Justice sign up. The thinking behind that really was there's so many people who like are wanting to do things and in taking action and then in this time of a lot of isolation, and we were really seeing CoJourn as a way to help people have a little more support and a place to land every week and like really think intentionally about what they want to do and how to have the most impact in the ways they want to, and the deviation from just our regular CoJourn, because CoJourn really is just a process of how to do something, right? And people work on anything they want to, is that we have like a curated packet with some of the best of the curated resources that we've seen, though there are a lot out there right now. And then also coaching available from social justice educators from a wide variety of different racial all social identity backgrounds, so that teams who might want a hand in different ways, depending on their own needs, their experience with racial justice, their identities, can reach out and actually get coaching along the way. And so it's still very much in iteration. It's a pilot. We're still co-creating it. Emily Pritchard, who's on today, is one of our coaches. But so that forum will have more, and this Sunday night will be the launch of that. So, and we've had a lot of interest and attention, and also from people from organizations who are interested, like you said, Kate, like as a way to harness the energy of the moment and really help people move forward with that support, in light of all the physical disconnection.
It looks like Ivan has a question.
Well, I just want to chime in and say, again, delighted that we were able to join you guys. Karl, I'm actually intrigued. One of in your sort of bullets, why you chose to go in through this CoJourn was, you mentioned your mom and your sister, which I thought was interesting. I wondered if you could sort of dive in a little bit more about that, because I hadn't really thought about it, but I'm like, wow, I could imagine what a great journey that might be with a sibling that perhaps I have an older brother that's 7 years older than me that I hadn't really, we bonded because he's my brother, but perhaps this is a different way to kind of create a different relationship. So I don't wonder if you could talk a bit more about that.
I mean, that example I was talking about was more about wanting to be intentional with my relationships, I think, and especially since at that time in my life I had been out of the state for the last like 8 years or something like that. So when I came back to Massachusetts, where my parents lived, my 2 brothers lived, I have 4 brothers, 4 sisters. So it's hard to keep track of them all, first of all. So it's very easy to lose track of them. But I think it was more about coming back and having them around and being like, oh, well, I could slip into my old patterns of kind of superficial, jokey stuff, or I could be intentional about really trying to get to know them. And the only way I knew how to do that was to like force myself to do it by making goals and having some accountability to like do these things that I said I wanted to do. But unless I reflect and like, force myself to do it, it didn't always happen. So it was amazing to see like, oh, when I did these little things week after week, what changed that helped me with those relationships and just following through on the things I wanted.
And Karl, I think that's a beautiful lead into the next section, which is how to think about finding a CoJourn partner, Ivan, because I also heard you say that actually doing CoJourn with a sibling could be a neat way to, for the relationship. And that is, we have had a lot of sibling teams for that very reason. So.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect transition actually, because it really is. We have seen. I think siblings. I've worked with my brother. I've worked with a good college friend. I considered doing it with my mom. I still haven't. It just hasn't happened. But I will say the relationships have changed. I think when you actively listen, and we'll talk about like some these 8 core components, but one of the key parts is like really being there and just listening to somebody as they go through their struggles, as they try to figure out what's working with their goal setting, what's working in their life, and reflecting on their dreams and all these things. How much your view of who your parents are or who your brother is, how that can change, and all these preconceptions like, oh, I thought my older brother was this big tough guy, and it turns out he is like the most sensitive man I've ever known. And so it's so when we're thinking about who could we possibly do have an accountability partnership with, we always kind of advise people to start with the people in their lives they want to try to get to know a little better, people they like to talk to, that maybe they want to talk to regularly. So Emily is right there with her mom, actually. And this is my brother working with his college friend, actually. But I think that's the the best starting point is like looking around in your life and thinking about, you know, who could I talk to every week for 30 minutes? And some people decide like, well, I'd actually rather, you know, I'm working on business things or something. I'd rather be working with somebody I'm not as close with. I might want to work with a colleague. I might want to work with, you know, or even be matched with somebody. But it's in the end, I think the depth that you can get to with somebody you already have a relationship is really valuable, at least in my eyes. And there's, you know, we do have some do's and don'ts. Most of these through, you know, experience or through interviews, but, you know, I think trust is really a great thing to come in with, although you don't have to have it. Like I came into one of my partnerships with not a lot of trust, and I had to kind of go through a little painful beginning because of that, you know, because there is some vulnerability that happens when you talk about, you know, hopes and dreams and what you want out of your life. You know, being somebody you like is great. Definitely being somebody that you dislike, I think you should try to steer away from that. Somebody who will follow through because it is a commitment, I think that's also super important, because if you're looking to really make some movement on your goals, you start relying on that weekly touch point. And there's some practical things like availability, you know, like it's really difficult sometimes to find a time if somebody's on a, you know, in Australia while you're in, you know, Boston or something like that. So, and then finally wanting to do it. I think, you know, we try to emphasize it a lot, but this should be just for you. It should be about you in the end. And so like it should be for your partner and for them, not necessarily for you. So you really want to find somebody that wants to do it for their own life, I guess. And some of the don'ts, so, you know, yeah, some basics like, you know, wanting to change. All of these things, like we see this a lot with siblings. Somebody you want to change, or somebody you have like really strong opinions and you want to, you know, give all your advice, and you know, an older sibling that you hold up on a pedestal, or I don't know. These things are all addressable, but they're sort of the cautions to be like, if you're coming into with that, you want to be wary. So we're gonna pause here. That's sort of a lot of information to start, but we want to pause because it's so important, I think, to, you know, to get the most out of this. I think you know, a big part of CoJourn is reflecting and thinking about how this might relate to your life. But right now we're just going to kind of pause and think about partners, because that's the first step, you know, and who could you possibly envision talking with once a week? Who could you envision, you know, possibly opening up to about and you know, opening up about your life and your dreams, and we will also say, take this time. We're gonna take 2 minutes for this. Feel free to get up and stretch, but we do encourage, yeah, think about, you know, how could this fit into your life, and who could it, you know, would you rather be thinking about somebody that you don't know so well, somebody you want to get closer with? Generational gaps are really interesting and great, you know. So we'll pause there. Molly,
I set my timer.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, that was 2 minutes. Hopefully that gave you a second to at least, put your mind on it, and or take a quick break if you needed to. I do want to say we have been experimenting with partner matching. That's what we're doing like at UMass and within organizations, and people who are using this in more professional settings often will start at a more surface level with their partner because they didn't know each other before. Yet we had in our pilot testing, people said in their interviews and in their surveys that over time, they were able to start showing a little bit more of themselves and build more of that relationship. And for CoJourn for Racial Justice, we will be offering partner matching as a test for folks and see how that goes. Before we move on to sort of more the nuts and bolts of how to do CoJourn, does anybody have any questions?
Okay.
Oh, we'll keep going. Great.
I almost blew it on here.
Yeah. Okay. So this is we had said that we would raffle off a signed copy of the book that I will mail to you from my house because it's the only way we can get it at this point. I mean, it's available online as well, but I'll mail it to you. And the question is, whoever first writes in the chat, this picture was taken today by Michael Morgan, our intern. Thank you, Michael. And so whoever can say in the chat first where you think this picture was taken from. Where was Michael when he took this picture? Wins the book. Need the Jeopardy theme song. Dee, dee, dee. Oh, Nate!
Oh.
Won! Michael? Come on. Is he correct?
Correct.
Which was it on the second floor?
It was the 4th floor.
4th floor. Okay.
4th floor.
Yeah, that was impressive.
That was impressive.
Congratulations, Nate. If you send me, I think, Nate, what might be easiest, I will put our emails in the thing, but you can also send me a chat with your address and this will be coming into the mail for you. And now that we had that exciting raffle, we will share just a little bit of the nuts and bolts of how to do CoJourn. And so
yes. So we're going to start with some basics on goals and intentions because we talk about goals and intentions a lot. And the way that we talk about it may be slightly different than I've heard it in the past. So when we talk about intentions, this is something, it's how you want to be. It's more process oriented. It's more about the journey. It's not about necessarily the concrete measurable things. Whereas goal is something it's what you want to do. So it's action versus process is more about like action and results, concrete, measurable. So when we pull that into CoJourn, we have the concept of, after this guiding theme. So the guiding theme is this intention that you set for your period of time. Usually it's a year, it could be 3 months, 6 months. But basically it's something related to your life where you want to put consistent intention. So, opposing, opposite of kind of a goal, this is something that's broad, it's not measurable. This should be something that's healthy for you, flexible, so that you can do it. You're going to be making a lot of goals in this direction. And really, it's really just your path for your CoJourn journey. So some quick tips, there's no one size fits all. The wording really only needs to matter to you. We always recommend really trying to make it like a gift, something that really feels like vibrant and good for you. Some guiding questions about, does it feel, is it relevant right now? Is it sustainable for the full program? Does it feel light? And it's always good to check with your partner to make sure that, you know, they can support you with what you're going after, and they, you know, they aren't, you know, they don't have like strong feelings against you going in this direction. And we always recommend taking a couple weeks just to find the right wording, you know, make sure that each time you look at this guiding theme, that it really resonates and brings you back to why you chose that in the first place. And so just to give you a few examples, you know, just so you can start visualizing what these might look like. I think most of these are all from past participants, you know, working on building relationships, being more proactive, prioritizing creativity. There's a lot of, you know, you'll see a lot of guiding themes around work-life balance, you know, healthier living, as well as, you know, around activism and you know, setting my environment up to support my success. That was sort of a kind of a hybrid, sort of catching all, like working on, you know, this person wanted to work more on, you know, getting their home in order as well as their life, you know, sort of the different tiers of creating your a better environment for yourself. And my favorite is playing more. I would love to, still haven't done that one, but I think working on that for an extended period of time would be a wonderful thing. But I tend to play. And just a few examples of some of the participants in the book. Alex Vasquez worked on being a consistent finisher. Sari worked on making space by completing, releasing, and being open to receiving, which I think probably makes more sense for her than it does for me. I may not even know what she was working on there. Ronnie Varget, I actually don't know how to pronounce her name. Varghese.
Yeah.
She was cultivating healthy relationships with herself and others, similar to my first year, actually. And then Mike Funk working on healthy living.
And just to say, you know, we've gotten people say it's helpful to hear about how other people have used it in different roles, which is why we, in the book, we have 12 contributors who write in a little more depth about how they use CoJourn. So all 4 of those people sort of shared their journey with the program a little bit. And moving beyond, so you have the guiding theme that you're working on over time, and then each week you make what we call weekly milestones. And those are the little stepping stones that move you along the path toward the theme. And they're smaller, more manageable, and they're actually 4 different kinds of weekly milestones. SMART goals, weekly mini intentions, what we call spirit boosters, and path maintenance. And so for the weekly SMART goals, these are the, you know, goals that are specific, measurable, agreed upon, realistic, and time-based. So I will do this for 20 minutes a day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 p.m. Those types of very concrete goals. And often a lot of the goals are around that type. And then weekly mini intentions are more, as to go back to what Karl was saying, like a way of being. And so how do I want to be this week? And so on the next slide, an example, a weekly SMART goal. So 1 year I worked on prioritizing my creativity. And so a weekly SMART goal for me was to practice my accordion every morning for 15 minutes, very concrete. And then a weekly intention was to look at art all around me. I also want to, on my, right before the presentation, I had an idea of like a very present time this week example. So I'm working, this year to take myself seriously has been my guiding theme. And that's a lot about like pushing through my own imposter stuff, saying yes to opportunities, saying, taking myself seriously in terms of relationships, you know, in different ways. And I had made a weekly goal, a SMART goal, to every afternoon, even if no matter how much work I have, try to get outside and move even for a quick bike ride or walk around the neighborhood to reset. And then a weekly intention to really just believe that all of the things I'm doing are going to go well. Because I have a sort of a stressful week with a lot of different holding space around race and racism, and then this CoJourn presentation, and then another, like back-to-back things. And so rather than having the mindset of like feeling overwhelmed or like this is not going to go well, but really orienting myself in a particular mindset. And I'm pleased to say I was sort of in a bad mood, all day Zoom at 4 p.m. I was really grumpy today. And I was like, you know what, Molly, get on your bike and go out for a half hour. And I did it. And it actually, like, it kind of totally shifted my mindset. And I just had the faith that tonight would go well. And I love talking about CoJourn and I love Bates. So that was an easy steer, but I thought it would be helpful to give a real life day-to-day CoJourn example. And then finally, what we call spirit boosters. These may or may not relate directly to your guiding theme, but sometimes we need to make things to keep us going. Karl and I, these were made right after at the beginning of COVID-19, and my spirit booster for that first week had been to take my pug, his name is Wilbur Noodles, on a hike up Mount Holyoke in the morning. And I actually did it, and it really helped, and I took a photo that day. And Karl, do you want to share your spirit booster?
Yeah, well, before they shut down the beaches, my major spirit booster was, getting down to the beach like as much as possible. And that was a great, boost. Completely unrelated to my yearly intention, but so helpful.
And so then the last type of weekly milestone are what we call path maintenance goals. Again, these may not directly relate to your guiding theme, but these are things that are really useful to get accountability around. This picture on the left is me in process of cleaning out the closet in my office. And I had made that goal because I just knew I needed to do it. And I was able to do it because I had the accountability around it. And then taxes, which is coming up now because of the postponement in 3 weeks. So I need to start making some goals around taxes. But going back, every week we encourage people to say aloud what your guiding theme is, like prioritizing my creativity and making most, if not all of your weekly milestones directly related to the guiding theme. But we also want there to be some flexibility around it in terms of spirit boosters and path maintenance goals.
So just a quick kind of another in action type of thing, but this person working on mental, physical well-being could make all kinds of weekly milestones, and these will, adapt to week to what's going on in their life. But, we see a lot of these getting outside, how helpful that is on mental, physical well-being, meditation. These are the concrete ones, like try out a new workout app, drink a full glass of water as soon as you wake up. That's one that used in the past. That's fantastic. Things like reducing sugar and all these things that you can work on around a guiding theme. As it just keeps building and building.
And so now we're going to invite another Bates alum, Emily Pritchard, to share a little bit about her experience with CoJourn, thinking about the guiding theme and weekly milestones, or anything you feel moved to say. Emily.
Hi. Hello from my basement in Northampton, Massachusetts. It's really nice to see so many Batesies, and it's easy. I feel like it's easy to talk really positively about CoJourn. I've done a few rounds of CoJourn. I got to be one of the sort of guinea pigs in the beginning and tried it out with my mom. And things like this have been kind of an easy sell for me, I would say, in general. So it was an easy yes to experiment with, but I really didn't anticipate the things that would happen to my relationship with my mom. I kind of assumed I would go in and we would have different goals and sort of call each other, and then I would deal with some of the challenges, the ups and downs of being parented while you're trying to have goals and all this stuff, right? But the thing that was a really lovely surprise was that the way that Molly and Karl have designed this, particularly the weekly intentions and the parameters around how you support one another, fundamentally transformed my relationship with my mom. And I had a really great relationship, I would say. I would qualify it as a really positive one beforehand. But it was sort of mentioned, I think Karl said it, like you get into these patterns with people, particularly that you have really long-term relationships with. I think we all understand that. And like, and with my mom, you know, we would maybe talk on the phone every month or so, and I would sort of brace myself for the overwhelm of like 2 hours of catching up with her and what's it going to be. And we're going to hit these certain points, and then I'm going to feel anxious or I'm going to feel stressed, and then we're going to end the conversation and I won't talk to her for another month. And that's sort of the equivalent of me loving my mom and feeling loved by my mom. And so then for this experiment, we both chose like goals related to our health, separate from one another. I think my yearly intention was to do originally with like balancing my mind and my body in terms of like my own personal health. And there was something so freeing in having these like really kind of like discrete, organized weekly conversations about what's really at the heart of what we're going after that week. And so it just cut through all the other stuff. It was like this totally unique way to have a conversation with her that we had never had I was probably, I don't know, I'm like 42 now. So like, it's probably like 38 years of like living, you know, I had never had that experience with her. And I would think about her throughout the week, like her little mini triumphs. And she let me in on information about just the way she sees the world or her fears or things that cause her stress that I think were never accessible to me before as a daughter. So it like shifted us into a totally different relationship that I don't think we ever would have accessed had we not been doing something that was organized this way. And as a result, like our relationship remains transformed. You know, I feel like I can say things to her, I can share things about like my weekly goals or my weekly intentions, and she gets it. And we have sort of like a shared language now. And yeah, there was something about how non-judgmental it was and how sort of like supportive it is, and that the essence of it wasn't to like conquer, it wasn't to like always show up having completed what you set out to do. It was more or less like standing in your integrity and having someone else recognize that and love you anyway. And there was something about that that was just like really deep into my connection to her. And so I just feel like it's this amazing thing that's like available to anybody in any relationship. And I can see how it would be really powerful around issues of social justice, but also just like, you know, just like Ivan, you said about your brother, I feel like it'd be so valuable just sort of like trying to crack open a relationship in a different direction. This is a really, really valuable tool for that. And the fact that it's a year, it's a really long time, but when it's broken into these small manageable chunks, you can really start to notice like pretty big things start to shift for you. The other thing I'd say is just that I love how there's sort of a varying, like you can really make these weekly goals really finite, like the whole, like I'm gonna meditate for 10 minutes a day. Or if you're not feeling that, you can sort of make that sort of like more intangible, like I'm gonna approach, you know, this week with like an open mind or an open heart or whatever it happens to be. It just feels like there's a way in, there's like an entry point for everybody depending on what they're going after. So I can't say enough of good stuff about CoJourn. I think it's really fabulous. I'm still doing it. My yearly intention right now is to find my true north and to try to operate from like what I find as really true for myself. And it's just amazing because like you set out with this idea of what you think you're going to end up doing, and then, you know, the real gift is like where you actually go. So I don't know when to stop talking. I could just keep talking.
I love hearing you talk. It's so wild.
Over to you for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Does anybody have any questions or comments? This is maybe a good spot to pause for a minute. Okay. Well, our next piece is a in full disclosure, originally we were going to put you all into breakout rooms with pairs, but we're a smaller group. So I think that it'll work just to give you a couple of minutes to reflect for yourself, like integrate, thinking about how would I apply this to me? Are there any examples of guiding themes that resonated for you based on what you might need in your life? Or did you hear, any just general areas that maybe it could be applied to? So we'll give a couple of minutes of silence for people to think, and then we'll invite anyone who feels moved to share again, either in the chat or verbally. That was
Perfect timing.
Yes. And we did get a comment from Gail. Thank you so much. It said this adds the element of the partner not found in the other work I'm doing. Is there anything that you wanted to add about that, Gail? Or if not, that's fine. I see that you're on mute. So
I think I'm unmuting myself. I think that the commitment to working with another is extremely powerful. And there's there have been many programs that I've worked on in the past around my career in social work. And actually before even doing social work, recognizing that friends who just were working on any kind of a goal for themselves, not as complex as that if we talked about it together, if we worked on it together, even if we lost commitment to ourselves for some reason, adding that commitment to the other person is extremely powerful. And then there's just a whole synergy that develops that would never have been there before.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you for naming that. And we always say that for CoJourn, it's almost like you have to experience it to embody, like have the embodied experience of what it, yeah. So I appreciate you naming this idea of the synergy.
I just wanted to add one other thing that I think could be a small thing that people may be interested in that relates to this and is a tool to use with this. There's an app, a free app that is international called Insight Timer. I don't know if you're aware of that. It sounds like it's a timing device, but it isn't. It's a connecting device. And your elements about daily gratitude, about intentions, about a lot of what you're doing could be supported with this. It certainly doesn't in any way replace what you're doing. It's just an ancillary app that is extremely powerful. I've been using that for years, along with silent meditation. It has a timer in there for your silent meditation. And it also has guided meditations if you're not feeling strong enough to just sit silently. There's just a lot that could support what you're doing. It's not a replacement, it's just a support to help with some of the goals that you have.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll definitely look into that. We did get another comment in the chat. Thank you for Bob. Brings to mind the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And Kate Kessler asked the perfect transition set question to our next segment, which is about the idea of accountability and the idea of holding ourselves accountable is associated with punitive or negative concepts, and how can we make it feel more positive. Karl, should I just speak to it now, or should we do it in the context of the 8 core components? Maybe it'll be better in the context of the 8 core components.
Sure.
We will answer that in like 2 minutes, Kate. I also want to name, I got a private chat from someone, which I so appreciate, thinking about the power of networking. Going back to Ariel, not to put you on the spot, where are you interested in being geographically?
That's a good question. And I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'm really open-minded, and yeah, and I'm happy to be anywhere, I think.
Perfect. So Ariel, I'll invite you to put your, if you don't mind, put your Bates email in the chat. And then if folks have ideas of connections or resources for a 2020 grad looking for teaching work, you had said, yes, that's your main. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for the question. All right. So for our last bit, Karl will reshare the slides. So we have these, what we call the 8 core components of CoJourn. We call it the secret sauce, but this is what we argue and believe makes it work and so effective for people, in contrast to other, accountability partner agreements. Some of this stemmed from research, some of this stemmed from Karl and I, our needs at the time, and now we've gone back and looked at the research that backs the value of this. A lot of it is simple. And I'll say a lot of it is definitely things that many of us, myself included, don't hold on to as much as we might want to or think we would like to. And Emily spoke to a couple of these, so I'll make sure to highlight those. But and 3 of these 8 core components are related to the connection piece of CoJourn, and then the other 5 are related to the accountability, the follow-through part. I want to name, we have online a guidebook, a companion guidebook, and our materials, there's still no required cost to access them, but if you download the guidebook, you can have more in-depth explanations of these. We're just going to give a cursory overview. But the human connection piece, Karl and I are going to alternate every 2, but I'll say the first is about peer support. And so CoJourn is not a peer coaching model. And I think that's a really important distinguishing feature. Your role with your CoJourn partner is really just to hold space for them and give them a chance to tap into their own knowing about what they need for their weekly goals. And so we tell people to avoid all unsolicited advice and not coach each other, unless at times you can ask for it. You can ask your partner for their thinking, or you can offer your thinking if you really have a strong idea, but only with your partner's consent. And I think that prevents a lot of tangles that can happen with accountability partnerships, where someone maybe tells you what they think you need to do that doesn't really feel in alignment for you or doesn't feel good.
And I think also speaks directly to what Emily was talking about with working with a parent or a sibling or somebody with the old entangled relationships. I think this is super helpful for that.
And then the second part of the connection is around active listening. And this is a lot of my academic work, is around the art of listening. And 80% of our communication time is spent listening, yet it's the one skill as opposed to reading, writing, and speaking that very few of us have formal training on or really pay a whole lot of attention to. So the goal in CoJourn is really to practice listening without judging, practice paraphrasing, being patient with the speaker, noticing nonverbals. And also, we encourage people to like avoid multitasking during your CoJourn check-in, and really just keep bringing your mind back and give your partner the gift of your complete, full, undivided attention, which is a resource that very few of us have nearly as much as we could use in our life to be listened to in that way.
Yeah, this one is a consistent struggle, I think, for for most people, myself included.
And in the interviews, people talk about the impact that it's had on their listening skills outside of CoJourn, to have this chance every week to practice. And you record your partner's goals for them each week in a spreadsheet, so it kind of forces you to listen because you have to paraphrase them and write them down.
And then the third one, kind of related to the connection side of things, is just that kind of similar to coming in with, peer support. Like you want to come into this with the air of, the goal of confidentiality. And the main thing there is that we wanted this to be a space where people are comfortable, mainly ourselves in the beginning, but, a place where you feel like there's no question of whether you're gonna say something that your partner then like blabs to your, friends or something like that. So it's, it's always good. And this is partly, I think, part of like the commitment is like, hey, I'm going to commit to being, keeping this confidential. So there's a safe kind of clear space for us. And then if there's something we want to talk about, within the confines of CoJourn, we just sort of ask each other and be like, hey, is it all right that I said that you just, got this, you just quit your job? Like, is that cool? So it was, it's very practical, I think, to create like kind of a clear boundary for CoJourn. And so the next 5 are all related to follow through and how to follow through in a sustainable, long-term way, and kind of like these life-changing long-term follow through. So the first one is, this accountability magic, and really what it's all about is just, if you have something you do, you write it down, you tell somebody about it, and then you follow up with them and give account to, what you said you wanted to do, and having some sort of, it's not that you're gonna, be chided if you, if you fail, but there is that pressure, like it's like a positive pressure, I think, and it's more from yourself, but.
And I want to speak quickly to Kate's question about the sort of some of the negative connotations of accountability, and the literature talks about the difference between legitimate and illegitimate accountability. And illegitimate accountability is being held accountable for something that you might not necessarily be choosing by someone that you didn't necessarily choose to hold you accountable. As in contrast, legitimate accountability is like something that you're choosing to be held accountable for, and that you're choosing the person to hold you accountable. And so that's the type of accountability that we're talking about and working with in CoJourn.
Yeah, and when we were first talking about this, I saw a lot of illegitimate accountability in the corporate world, where they'd just be like dictating what you have to do, even if you like really don't agree. And it's just like, well, you're gonna have to be accountable to this, and it's just, and so it felt so refreshing to have this sort of thing that you choose, that you want to be doing, and have somebody hold you accountable to what you really need. And I think that's why it works so well.
And then, you're making a commitment. This is one of the parts of follow through, both to yourself, but also your partner's counting on you to show up for the weekly check-in. And we recommend about a 30-minute check-in every week, and create it at a set time and hold it like you would like a staff meeting, so that you don't have to always be finding a new time. We even have in our materials a contract that you can both sign to symbolically state that you're committing to this. the original was for a year. It was like a way to keep your New Year's resolution for a full year. And now our latest model we're experimenting with is 12 weeks, which seems to be the minimum length of time to really be able to make change and build that relationship, but it works well within a college schedule for a semester or a summer. And then the next one, this is actually in our interviews, the core component that seems to have the most impact on people. And this is the one Emily was speaking to, but the idea of it being based in a non-judgmental and compassionate approach to change. When we were creating CoJourn, Karl and I, as I had shown you, we're both struggling and we just could not bear to have one more thing we weren't doing well or measuring up on. And so we're like, we're just going to make this a way to be really gentle and kind to ourselves as we strive for the goals that we want. And so, you know, it's really about giving ourselves the same kindness and care we would give a good friend, embracing ourselves as we are, as we move through the process. And our partner can help remind us to stay in this place of self-compassion. After creating CoJourn, we really dove into a lot of the research on self-compassion, which if you haven't explored it, I encourage you to, because it's fascinating. But looking at the number one reason we criticize ourselves is we think that will motivate us to go in the direction we want to. And then actually research shows the opposite, that when we are kind to ourselves, it increases all the feel-good hormones and makes us more likely, decreases stress and makes us more likely to follow through in the direction we want to over time. And so it's often really counterintuitive to the way many of us were socialized. And then there's a lot of things that, you know, self-compassion is really strongly related to: mental well-being, less depression, anxiety, stress, and perfectionism, more positive states, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, we have the website here for Kristen Neff, who has been one of the lead researchers. There are others. She was at UC Berkeley originally, but she has a great website, selfcompassion.org. But CoJourn gives you a chance to kind of practice being self-compassionate every week around your goals, but then it also can, similar to active listening, people talk about how it kind of bleeds into other areas of life.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the big reasons you come back each week, is that it doesn't feel like this heavy, like negative thing that you have to show up for. Like, oh, geez, I failed again. You know, it makes it a little more fun to be able to like laugh when you screw up, or yeah, support your friend in that. And then this one actually came kind of later down the road. We kept, you know, I think Molly's a great celebrator, and she brought that into, I think, our team, but we didn't really think about how integral this was until we started hearing from people about how important it is to have this sort of, you know, forward momentum and you know, success mindset, and we often don't really celebrate little things. You know, we don't celebrate like drinking a glass of water every morning. You know, why would you ever celebrate that? But it's really like, you know, there's a lot of you know, there's a lot of backing to why that is helpful to keep what am I trying to say here?
There's research that shows that you get like a dopamine hit when you celebrate a small accomplishment, and then that gets you to keep moving through.
Yeah,
the joys of co-facilitation. Oh, of course, Karl, my pleasure.
Yes, and the negativity bias. I almost forgot. But yeah, there's this idea of the negativity bias, how we have to, you know, our brains are sort of wired to treat the negative thoughts like 5 times stronger than positive thoughts. So we really have to be kind of like flooding our brains with, you know, this success, and we're, you know, you did it and you did it and you did it, to sort of relearn, you know, how to, yeah, the strength of positivity. And finally, we also started this as an experiment to just choose one thing to go after for a year, you know. And so when we first started talking about, you know, New Year's resolutions was one of the sort of the inspirations for this program. But Molly had like 5 different New Year's resolutions, like these massive projects she was going after, and I was like super anti New Year's resolutions. And so we kind of had this discussion, and like we tried it and said like, well, what if we just do one thing really well and make some real movement on that one thing? And you know, as we started learning and seeing the success of that, we started reading more, and you know, reading more about like the sort of the myth of multitasking, about how we're supposed to be, you know, good at everything. We're supposed to be like the best friend, the best, you know, partner, best parent, best, you know, academic, best, you know, worker, all this stuff. And it really, it's just overwhelming. And we were kind of seeing that ourselves. And so you know, in the spirit of really making lasting positive change, we wanted to make CoJourn all about just the singular focus for 1 year. And we kind of have this, I don't believe it's Confucius, but the man who chases 2 rabbits catches neither. That's sort of like our you know, our mantra for, you know, like, let's just, what's most relevant this year, and let's really focus our attention there and make some real positive change in that direction, rather than having our attention diverted. I mean, it's going to happen regardless in our lives, but at least here.
And so those are the 8 core components. I know that sort of inform how you set your guiding theme and your weekly milestones. And I know we just have a couple of minutes left. So Karl, if you move down toward the end, we can talk for a second just about how the weekly check-in works. It's very simple. You catch up how you did with last week's goals. You think about the context of the upcoming week. You make your weekly milestones. Your partner records them for you, reminds you to be compassionate with yourself as you're doing it, and then you switch roles. And we have this tracking document that is a nice way. Karl, can you advance to the tracking document quickly? So that's a nice way to keep track. And so then at the end of the year, or the end of the 3 months, you have this beautiful record of all of your goals, and you can go back and remember like, oh gosh, that time I was going through all of this, and this is, you know, what I achieved. And then we encourage partners to have process check-ins along the way. If you sign up on our website, you'll get weekly emails. And so one of them will be like, now's a good time to have a process check-in to see with your partner. And we have guided questions to talk through together about how the process is going, if there's more that you need from each other. And I've put both of our CoJourn email and then both of our emails in the chat. So if anybody has any, you know, further questions later or comments or anything you want to follow up on, feel free to. Then we have a couple of minutes for any additional questions or comments before we turn it back to Heather. Anyone?
Anything that's confusing, or any of those 8 core components that seem particularly troubling, or not troubling, but difficult. Some of them. Maybe not troubling isn't the right word.
You could stop sharing the screen. Last comments. Great. Well, you know how to get in contact with us. This was such a delight.
Yeah.
Thank you all. It was really good to be with you all.
Well, thank you, Molly and Karl, for participating with us. And thank you to everybody who also took the time out of your busy day to be a part of this. It's been a really awesome experience. I'm already starting to think about how I want to do this, which is really great. I want to remind everybody that you could look for, and I hope you'll complete the post-event survey. This will help us think about, you know, what your desires and your expectations are about virtual alumni programming as we move forward in this time. And Molly alluded to partner matching earlier. So if you would like to be matched with a partner for your own CoJourn, you can indicate this on the survey and we can follow up with you directly about that. And if no one else has any other questions, I want to Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I hope everybody has a really pleasant evening and a lovely weekend. Thank you, Molly and Carl. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.